All right, let's quickly describe a couple more Ethernet-based devices and their technology. First is the patch panel. Patch panel is a physical device that you connect the cables to for the computers. It's the longer runs of cables, say from the server room out to the jacks in a particular company. And for example, you might see a patch panel like this, and it has lots of RJ45 ports on the front. This is a 24 port patch panel, and I'll use something like this from TrendNet or Leviton or several other companies. You want to have something nowadays that's Cat 6 or higher, so you can take advantage of gigabit speeds and even 10 gigabit speeds over copper. So that's just one example of that. You connect to the patch panel by way of punch downs. You punch down all the wires here on the back. So, you have the ports on the front, and those connect to your switches to allow connectivity between computers, but each cable, I should say, is punched down on the back. And this is one of the installs that I did. There's 8 wires for each cable. So you can imagine there's a lot of punch downs that you're going to do. And then these cables go out through the physical plant, through the ceiling and through the walls and conduit till they get to their final destination, which is going to be either a surface mount RJ45 jack, or it's going to be something in the floor or in the ceiling or in the cubicle. It depends where the installation goes. And generally, when I do the install, I'll use blue for the RJ45 jacks, and I'll usually run Telco as well, and I use white for that. Those are RJ11. So that's an example of the patch panel. The patch panel and the jacks are part of the permanent physical plant, and that's not going anywhere. Then to connect your computer, you use a patch cable from here to the computer, if you're doing it wired, that is. And that is the temporary connection, so to speak. So what we're talking about here is the permanent physical plant from the jack on the wall all the way to the server room at that patch panel. Another device is the repeater. A repeater can help you to repeat the signal over copper. Copper signals can be sent 100 meters or 328 feet when you're using twisted pair cable, which is the most common. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you need to repeat the signal. If you have a powered repeater, you can do that. You can increase the signal by almost 2 times. But if you're using something passive, any type of passive device for repeating or splitting, you have to be careful with that because that may cut the signal in half as far as the distance it can go. So you could use anything for a repeater. They have simple 1-port repeaters, or you could use a regular 4-port switch, which is what a lot of people do. And finally, power over Ethernet. Awesome technology. It's the IEEE 802.3 AF standard. And what this means is devices can not only get their data over the network cable, they'll get their power from that as well, as long as the device is compliant. And so, you can get devices in areas that have no power, but they can still work. And one example of this would be the power injector. This is pretty cool. Let's say you want to install a camera or a wireless access point in an area where there's no power line and there's no outlet. Maybe it's outside. Maybe it's on the ceiling somewhere in the middle of the building. Well, what you could do is you would take this device and put this by your router and just use a short patch cable to connect one of the ports on the router to this, or one of the ports on the switch to this. And then this device will take care of the power over Ethernet. This plugs into the wall and it generates power, and it sends that power out through the other side, another RJ45 port, and it sends the power and the data signal out to the device. And all you have to do at this point is run a twisted pair cable. You may want to use shielded cable to shield it from interference, or shield other cables that might be near it from the interference that may be generated by this cable. Be careful when it comes to power over Ethernet, or PoE. You never know what kind of code there may be in your town or municipality. An electrician may be required, it may not. So you always want to check with your local ordinance before you do any work when it comes to power over Ethernet. But this way you can just run a network cable out to wherever it is that you want the device to be. If you want, let's say in your house, you want a wireless access point or a camera by your deck, by the back door. Then you could just run the network cable instead of having to run an electric line, which is a lot more trouble. And so this is great for the company as well. You might want to have cameras outside in the perimeter of the building, or maybe inside, or wireless access points. And these things, the best place to put them is up on the ceiling, and there usually isn't any outlets up there. So this is a great way to do that. You use the 802.3 AF standard to send power over the Ethernet line. So there's a couple things you want to know. Ethernet-based devices, patch panels, the RJ45 jacks, repeaters, and power over Ethernet devices. Check some of those out online. Check out some of the products that are available to you. And that's about it for this sub lesson.